Death is not silence. It is not the end of awareness. It is the beginning of a journey more mysterious than anything most of us have ever imagined. A journey so sacred, so hidden, that only a handful of voices in history dared to reveal it. One of those voices was Edgar Cayce, the man known as the Sleeping Prophet. Through his trance readings, Cayce described in vivid detail what happens to the soul in the first 40 days after death. Not vague ideas, not poetic metaphors, but detailed insights that challenge everything we think we know about life, about death, and about what comes after. Imagine this moment. Your body has grown cold, your breathing has stopped, and yet, you are awake. More awake than you have ever been. You see your loved ones surrounding your body. You hear their whispers, their cries, their prayers. You even feel the heaviness of their grief. But you cannot move their hands. You cannot speak with their ears, because you are no longer bound by flesh. And still you are not gone. You are alive in a different way. Consciousness has not died. It has only stepped into another dimension. Cayce said this moment is not light or darkness, not heaven or hell. It is the opening of a sacred process, a divine sequence that every soul must walk through. And according to him, those 40 days are decisive. They shape everything that comes next. If you've ever lost someone you loved and asked yourself, where are they now? Do they see me? Do they suffer? This journey matters to you. If you've ever feared your own death or wondered what lies beyond the last heartbeat, Cayce's insights offer a map. They may challenge your old beliefs, but they can also bring comfort. So stay with us until the very end. Because when you understand these 40 days, you may never look at life or death the same way again. Share your thoughts in the comments, tell us your story, and if your perspective adds to this journey, we'll mark it with a heart as a way of thanking you. And don't forget, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss the insights we share here. Now close your eyes for a moment and picture this. Your body lies still, but your awareness rises. Cayce called this the sacred transition. You are no longer breathing. Your heart is silent, and yet your perception sharpens. You see the room more clearly than before. You sense every detail with a depth you never had in life. You are vividly conscious, but no longer bound by the laws of the physical world. This mirrors what many near-death experiencers describe, seeing doctors around them, or family crying even when their eyes were closed. Cayce's readings confirmed it. In those first minutes, the soul experiences a strange limbo. It knows it has left the body, but it has not yet fully entered the spiritual world. This stage is full of questions, flashes of memory, and a powerful inner reckoning. The soul begins to review its life, not as a calendar of events, but as a chain of emotions. It feels what it gave, what it took, who it loved, who it wounded. Every act, every intention comes rushing back. And here, judgment does not come from God or angels. It comes from your own higher self, the part of you that cannot lie, cannot hide, and sees with absolute clarity. For some, this realization is peace. For others, it brings deep regret. This isn't punishment, it's recognition of truth. Cayce revealed that during the first 3 days after death, the soul remains close to the body, not out of choice, but by necessity. It is part of the detachment process. Like waking from a long dream, the soul takes time to accept that it is no longer tied to flesh. It watches the funeral. It listens to prayers. It feels the emotions of those who gather. Many souls try to communicate in this stage. They long to say goodbye, to explain, to comfort. And sometimes their presence is felt. That sudden chill at a funeral, that unexplained rush of peace. It may not be imagination. It may be the soul's attempt to reach across the veil. Only the deeply intuitive or emotionally connected can sense it, but the effort is real. As those 72 hours pass, something begins to pull the soul upward, a gentle but irresistible force, drawing it toward a higher plane. And this is the moment when guides begin to appear. Cayce said these guides are never strangers. They are familiar energies, souls we have known in past lives, or beings of light we once touched in spiritual realms. Their presence is like a whisper in the silence. You are not alone. This concept appears in spiritual traditions worldwide. from guardian angels to spirit guides, suggesting a universal truth about our journey after death. On the fourth day, the soul begins its passage into what Cayce called the intermediate plane, a realm that stands between the earthly and the heavenly. Here, there is no judgment seat, no final verdict. Instead, there is reflection. This plane is not uniform. It is shaped by the vibration of the soul itself. Imagine entering a room that instantly mirrors the energy inside you. If your heart was full of compassion, patience, and kindness, the world around you feels luminous, gentle, and filled with harmony. But if your life was consumed by greed, bitterness, or cruelty, the surroundings grow heavy and shadowed, not as punishment, but as a reflection of what you carry. Cayce emphasized that these early days are not about heaven or hell, but about awareness. In this space, illusions fall away. You can no longer lie to yourself. You can no longer say, "I didn't mean it," or "they made me do it." What you truly were vibrates all around you, and for many souls this is either a shock or a liberation. Modern psychology recognizes this concept as authentic self-confrontation, the moment when all defenses dissolve and we face our true nature. Whether in life or death, such moments can be transformative catalysts for growth. Between the 5th and 10th day, the soul begins encountering others. These are not wandering ghosts, but conscious beings traveling their own spiritual paths. Some may feel familiar, faces you loved in other lives. Others are unknown, yet they carry a presence that feels significant. Communication here does not happen with words. It happens with thought. Cayce said telepathic communion is the universal language of the afterlife. Every intention, every memory, every emotion is visible. If you hold guilt, it darkens the space around you. If you hold love, it glows like radiant light. In this stage, many souls learn their first great lesson. Consciousness creates reality. Everything you carry inside becomes your environment. This is why some souls remain stuck here. They replay regrets, cling to anger, refuse to forgive. They build prisons out of their own thoughts, and they may remain here for years or decades until they let go. But for those who release their attachments, the journey continues. This principle aligns with both Eastern philosophy and quantum physics, the idea that consciousness actively participates in creating experienced reality. As the days unfold toward the second week, the soul begins to feel a deeper pull. Between day 11 and day 20, Cayce said the soul experiences what he called a calling. This is not a sound or a voice. It is an inner knowing, a pull toward a place of learning. Imagine a compass within you that suddenly points in one direction, impossible to resist. The soul follows this pull until it enters what many traditions have described as the Hall of Records, or the Temple of Learning. Cayce insisted these are not myths. They represent real states of consciousness in the spiritual dimension, accessible to souls prepared to grow. Inside, the atmosphere is unlike anything on Earth. Knowledge is alive. It flows not from books or teachers, but directly into the soul's awareness. Beings of wisdom appear, elders, teachers, radiant guides who exude compassion and authority. They are not there to punish, but to reveal. They show the soul visions, past lives, choices, strengths hidden, opportunities missed. The experience is not about guilt, it is about understanding. The soul begins to see its purpose clearly, why it was born, what it achieved, what it avoided, and what remains undone. Many souls leave this stage humbled, realizing how much work is still ahead. Others leave inspired, choosing to reincarnate not because they must, but because they want to. Cayce explained that reincarnation is never forced. It is chosen by the soul, once it realizes the lessons it still longs to master. This view of voluntary spiritual evolution appears in many wisdom traditions, suggesting that growth continues across multiple lifetimes as consciousness expands its understanding and compassion. As the third week begins, something profound unfolds. The soul, more awake than ever, starts to remember, not just the life it has left, but lifetimes before. Cayce said the veil between incarnations becomes thin here. Memories rise, not as random fragments, but as threads woven into a vast design. A battlefield centuries ago, a family dinner in another century, a lover's face from a forgotten life. These are not illusions, they are reminders. The soul sees how every incarnation is linked, how choices made long ago ripple into the present. For some souls, this is overwhelming. They realize how many times they've repeated the same mistakes, how stubborn patterns of fear or pride carried across lifetimes. But for others, this stage brings a rush of clarity, as if puzzle pieces finally fit together. They see divine design everywhere. No encounter was random, no suffering was wasted. Each moment carried meaning, and for the first time, the soul sees the full arc of its evolution. Some feel peace, others feel urgency, vowing to return and finish the work they left undone. This recognition of life's interconnectedness reflects deep spiritual principles found in many traditions. By the 30th day, the soul reaches what Cayce described as a plateau, a stage of pause where confusion fades and clarity takes its place. Up to this point, the soul has moved through shock, review, reflection, and remembrance. Now, it begins to feel something entirely different: readiness. It is no longer lost or wandering. It has begun to embrace its true identity. But before it can move forward, there is one last threshold to cross, one final revelation that Cayce considered among the most sacred: the encounter with the higher self. Imagine this moment. You stand before a radiant version of yourself, not the you shaped by fear, mistakes, or ego, but the eternal spark that has existed beyond time. Meeting this presence is not like looking in a mirror. It is like returning home after lifetimes of wandering. The higher self radiates peace, but its light also exposes every shadow. In its presence, all illusions vanish. You realize that your personality was temporary, your fears were lessons, and your true essence has always been love. Cayce described this meeting as both humbling and empowering. For some, it is a brief glimpse. For others, it is the most transformative experience of their entire spiritual existence. The higher self does not speak with words. It communicates through direct knowing, flowing into the soul like light flooding a dark room. It shows you who you really are, not the identity you wore on earth, but the being you have always been. And then comes the question, not imposed by another but offered from within. What do you choose now? This is the critical turning point. The soul has absolute freedom. Some choose to remain in the spiritual realms, continuing to learn and evolve. Others choose to return to earth with new purpose, determined to grow where they once faltered. And some make a choice born of love, to reincarnate, not for themselves, but to help others still struggling. Cayce emphasized that nothing is forced. The soul always chooses its next step. This concept of free will extending beyond death appears in many spiritual philosophies, suggesting that growth is always voluntary and love-motivated, rather than compelled by external forces. As the final days of the journey unfold, the soul begins to sense another presence, the soul group. Cayce explained that no soul evolves alone. We are part of a spiritual family that journeys together across incarnations. Some of these souls were your parents in one life, your child in another, a stranger who appeared at the right moment, or even an enemy who forced you to grow. None of these encounters were accidents. They were part of the group's shared evolution. By the 35th day, many souls begin to feel this reunion. It is not like entering a crowd, but like remembering a family you had forgotten. The recognition is instant. The bonds are unbreakable. In this stage, the soul begins to understand that love is the ultimate currency of the universe. Knowledge matters, growth matters, but love transcends all. It is the force that binds soul groups, the energy that builds bridges between lifetimes. And for the first time, the soul sees how every act of love on earth, even the smallest, echoed far beyond the moment. That time you forgave instead of holding a grudge. That moment you chose kindness over pride. That act of service no one else noticed. These were not forgotten. They became part of your eternal journey. Cayce said this is why souls at this stage often radiate peace, because they finally grasp the truth. Everything fades: pain, wealth, power, failure. But love remains. This understanding transforms the soul's entire perspective, showing that earthly struggles were not meaningless, but opportunities to develop the only quality that truly matters in eternity. As the 40th day approaches, the soul feels a shift. Something within it settles as though the foundation of its new existence is locking into place. Cayce described this as a permanent change in the soul's energetic structure. It is as if one door closes and another opens silently. The 40 days are not an end. They are a checkpoint, a milestone. From here, the soul either rises into higher realms, reincarnates with new purpose, or remains in service of others. Some choose to work in what Cayce described as realms of healing, comforting souls who arrive broken by trauma, guiding them until they are ready to move forward. Others stay near Earth, serving as unseen guides to their families, whispering encouragement during moments of despair. These choices, Cayce insisted, are real. They are not fantasy. And every one of them is freely chosen based on the soul's understanding of how it can best serve the greater good and continue its own evolution. Once the 40th day fully arrives, the soul has crossed its first great threshold. According to Cayce, this moment is like a graduation, a transition from one stage of learning to the next. It is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new chapter. The energetic field of the soul stabilizes, and from this point on, its direction is set by the choices it has made, both during its earthly life and in these 40 sacred days. Some souls move upward, toward higher dimensions of wisdom and light. Others choose to reincarnate, returning to Earth with a renewed mission ready to grow, heal, and teach. Still others remain in spiritual service, helping guide those who come after them. None of these choices are random. All are acts of freedom. All are reflections of the soul's essence. Cayce called this final stage spiritual attunement, a state where the soul vibrates in harmony with its true nature. In this frequency, fear dissolves, confusion fades. The soul understands its path, and whether it chooses rest, rebirth, or service, it does so without hesitation. Imagine a tuning fork struck in perfect resonance. That is the soul on the 40th day, aligned, attuned, awake. And yet Cayce warned humanity not to wait until death to think about this process. He insisted that what we carry into the afterlife is nothing more and nothing less than the sum of our choices now. If we ignore the soul and chase only material things, we cross unprepared. If we cultivate love, reflection, and service, we awaken ready. So what does this mean for you, living and breathing in this moment? It means that every act matters. Every time you choose kindness instead of cruelty, patience instead of anger, forgiveness instead of resentment, you are building the atmosphere of your own afterlife. These choices are not forgotten. They are imprinted in your soul. When you step into those 40 days, they will surround you, either as burdens or as blessings. Think of it this way: money, titles, possessions, all of it will be stripped away when your last breath comes. But the character you built, the love you gave, the truth you lived, that is what walks with you into eternity. Now imagine this on a personal level. Think of someone you loved who has already passed away. You stood at their funeral, you cried, you prayed, you wondered, where are they now? Are they safe? Do they feel me? Cayce's insights suggest that they were walking this same path, reviewing their life, seeing you in those moments, feeling your love, even as their body lay still. And if they were ready, if they were open to growth, they were greeted by guides, embraced by their soul group, and led into the light of understanding. They are not gone. Not in the way we think. They are simply walking ahead of us on a road we will one day take ourselves. This is why Cayce's teachings matter so deeply. They remind us that death is not the end, but a passage, a doorway. And when you understand this, fear begins to loosen its grip. The thought of death no longer paralyzes. It awakens. It awakens you to live more fully now, to love without hesitation, to forgive more freely, to grow with purpose, because every choice echoes into eternity. This is not superstition. This reflects the eternal nature of consciousness and the continuing significance of our moral choices. So ask yourself, what are you doing today that your soul will thank you for tomorrow? Will you leave behind bitterness, or will you carry it into your eternal journey? Will you cling to pride, or will you choose compassion? These are not small questions. They are the foundation of your 40 days. And the answer is in your hands right now in this life, in this very moment. Let us go deeper. Imagine for a moment that your life is a book. Every page is written not with ink, but with energy. Every thought, every word, every action leaves a mark. When death comes, you don't close that book, you open it wider. You don't just read it, you feel it. If you brought joy to others, you relive that joy, multiplied. If you brought pain, you feel the echo of that pain as if it were your own. Cayce explained that this life review is not judgment. It is recognition. It is truth without disguise. And in those first 40 days, this recognition shapes everything. Some souls walk in peace, surrounded by light of their own making. Others walk through shadows, facing storms born of their own bitterness. The afterlife is not imposed from outside. It unfolds from within. This principle appears in many spiritual traditions and aligns with psychological understanding of how consciousness creates experience. Modern science, though cautious, has documented phenomena that echo what Cayce described a century ago. Thousands of near-death experiences describe the same elements: rising above the body, reviewing life in panoramic detail, encountering beings of light, and feeling an overwhelming sense that love is the measure of all things. These reports echo Cayce's descriptions with remarkable consistency. People from every culture, every religion, every background return with the same message: that consciousness does not die, and that love is the only thing that ultimately matters. When we place Cayce's readings alongside these testimonies, the pattern is striking. Think of it this way. If you were planning a journey to another country, you would prepare. You would learn the customs, study the language, pack the right supplies. Death is the greatest journey of all, yet most of us live as if we will never take it. We avoid the subject. We deny it. We fear it. Cayce's message was simple. Prepare. Not with fear, but with wisdom. Prepare by cultivating love, forgiveness, and awareness. Because when you step into those 40 days, you cannot pack money or titles or possessions. The only luggage you take is the condition of your soul, and that luggage determines whether you travel light or whether you carry burdens too heavy to move forward. This is why Cayce emphasized that spiritual growth cannot be postponed. He said the afterlife is not a magical escape from responsibility. It is a continuation of responsibility. The patterns you ignore now become the lessons you must face later. The relationships you refuse to heal become mirrors you must confront. The wounds you hide become realities you cannot escape. But here is the hope. Every step you take now, every effort to grow, every act of love lightens the path ahead. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to solve everything. You only have to walk in awareness. And that awareness becomes your greatest guide when the time comes. So consider your own life right now. Are you carrying grudges that weigh you down? Are you chasing achievements that vanish the moment your breath stops? Or are you building treasures that cannot be destroyed? Compassion, wisdom, faith, and love. These are not abstract questions. They carry practical importance, because one day your 40 days will begin. And when they do, the only thing that matters is what you built inside. To understand the depth of these 40 days, Cayce often compared them to a bridge. On one side stands the world of flesh, noise, and time. On the other side lies eternity, vast, silent, endless. The bridge is not made of stone. It is built from the choices of your life. Each step you take in those 40 days is supported or weakened by what you carried with you. For some, the crossing feels like walking across beams of light, steady and secure. For others, it feels like moving across crumbling wood, shaky and uncertain. But whether strong or weak, every soul must cross. None are exempt. Think about how different people might experience this path. A soul that lived with kindness may find itself quickly embraced by guides, comforted by a sense of belonging, moving forward with ease. A soul that clung to hatred or selfishness may wander in confusion, trapped in reflections of its own unresolved fears. This is why Cayce insisted that heaven and hell are not fixed places. They are states of consciousness. They are the reality you create inside yourself, magnified in the afterlife. No external judge places you there. You walk there by the weight or lightness of your own heart. Many traditions across the world echo this truth. Ancient Egyptians described a judgment where the heart was weighed against a feather. In Eastern traditions, karma determines the circumstances of rebirth. In Christian mysticism, the soul faces purification before entering higher realms. Cayce's readings harmonize with all these views, yet remove the fear of punishment. For him, the process was never about condemnation, but about learning. The soul does not suffer because someone punishes it. It experiences the natural consequences of its own choices, revealed with perfect clarity. And once it understands, it has the freedom to choose differently, to heal, to grow. Now consider this. The 40 days are not just about the dead. They are about the living. Every funeral, every vigil, every prayer offered in those first weeks holds power. Cayce suggested that the emotions of the living reach the soul like waves. When you pray for someone, they feel it. When you forgive them, even after death, it helps them move forward. When you cling to anger, it can create obstacles for their progress. This is why so many cultures hold rituals for 40 days. From Eastern Orthodox prayers to Tibetan readings of the Bardo, from Catholic novenas to indigenous mourning ceremonies, the number repeats across traditions. Cayce's insights explain why. Because those 40 days are the window where the soul is most sensitive, most in transition, and what the living send during that time shapes the crossing. This understanding transforms grief from helpless suffering into active participation in the departed soul's journey. So reflect for a moment. Who have you lost? Did you ever feel their presence after death? A chill in the air, a dream so vivid it felt more real than waking life, a sudden thought that seemed not your own. According to Cayce, these are not illusions. They are echoes of a soul still close, still moving through the bridge. And your response, whether love, prayer, or forgiveness, can become a guiding light for them. Death separates bodies, but not souls. Connection remains, especially in those 40 days. To see how Cayce's insights unfold in practice, imagine two very different souls beginning their 40-day journey. The first lived a life of compassion. She was not perfect, no one is, but she tried to forgive, to help where she could, to be honest even when it cost her something. When her last breath came, fear dissolved quickly. In the first days, she felt sorrow at leaving loved ones behind, but she also sensed peace. Her memories rose like gentle tides, moments of kindness she had forgotten, small sacrifices that now shone like treasures. By the third day, she felt the pull of guides surrounding her, familiar voices whispering, "You are safe, you are not alone." Her transition into the intermediate plane was smooth, like walking into sunlight after a long night. When she reached the Hall of Records, the visions shown to her confirmed what she already sensed, that love had been her compass, and that it would continue to guide her into new lessons with confidence. Now, picture another soul, one who lived in bitterness. Perhaps he clung to grudges, pursued only wealth, or caused harm without remorse. For him, the first moments after death were disorienting. He saw his body, heard the cries at the funeral, but felt no comfort, only a gnawing confusion. When the life review struck, it was overwhelming. Every insult, every selfish act, every wound inflicted, returned with sharp clarity. And because his heart resisted accountability, the intermediate plane mirrored that resistance. The world around him felt heavy, dim, unsettling. When other souls approached, his thoughts betrayed him. His guilt became visible, surrounding him like chains. His guides appeared too, but their presence, instead of comforting, made him turn away. He was not ready to accept. For such a soul, Cayce said, progress halts, not forever, but until he chooses release. That may take days, years, even centuries in Earth time, but the choice remains his, always. These two examples reveal the spectrum of experiences possible within the same 40 days. Neither soul was forced, neither was condemned. Each was simply met by truth, the reflection of what they carried within. Cayce wanted humanity to understand this clearly. The afterlife is not an arbitrary sentence handed down by a distant judge. It is the natural unfolding of consciousness. What you cultivate now becomes the landscape you walk through later. That is why forgiveness matters. That is why love matters. Because they lighten the path before it even begins. Think about it carefully. Which of these two journeys would you rather experience? The path of peace, where even flaws are absorbed by love, or the path of shadows, where denial chains you in your own regrets? The choice is not decided at death. It is decided here, moment by moment, in the way you live now. When we widen the lens, we discover that Cayce's insights about the 40 days are not isolated. They resonate across cultures and centuries. In the Eastern Orthodox Church, prayers are held precisely for 40 days after death, a tradition rooted in the belief that the soul is still in transition. In Tibetan Buddhism, the Bardo Thodol, commonly known as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, describes a 49-day passage where the soul moves through visions, encounters guides, and confronts its own inner illusions. In Islam, families gather on the 40th day to honor the departed, believing this marks the completion of a soul's critical passage. Even in ancient Egypt, the embalming process lasted 40 days, symbolizing purification before the soul's next stage. Different traditions, different symbols, but the number repeats. And Cayce, through his trance readings, explained why. Because the soul truly does pass through a transformative window lasting about 6 weeks, and at its heart lies the 40th day. Cayce's description adds clarity that unites these traditions. He explained that the rituals of the living, the prayers, the offerings, the ceremonies, are not symbolic gestures only. They have a direct effect on the soul. Imagine the living sending waves of energy, like currents in a river. Those waves either push the soul forward or weigh it down. This is why forgiveness matters not only for the living, but for the dead. To release resentment is to remove chains from both. To pray sincerely is to send light into a realm where the soul can still feel. This is not imagination, it is resonance. And it is why, across cultures, families instinctively gather, mourn, and pray in those 40 days. Now consider what this means for you. If you have lost someone, your thoughts and feelings toward them are not empty. They are bridges. When you pray for their peace, they sense it. When you send them love, they feel it. When you forgive them, even if the wound was deep, that act becomes a force that helps them step forward. And the reverse is also true. When you cling to bitterness, when you curse their memory, you send weight instead of wings. Cayce's teachings make this truth clear. The soul is deeply sensitive in those 40 days, open to the influence of both its own choices and the emotions of those left behind. This perspective transforms the way we grieve. Instead of thinking of death as an unbreakable wall, we can see it as a passage where connection is still possible. Dreams, sudden sensations, flashes of presence. These may be the soul's attempts to reach back, to remind us that they are not gone, only moving through. And our role as the living is to respond with love, to offer support through thought, prayer, and forgiveness. Death then becomes not only their journey, but ours as well, a shared crossing where both sides shape the outcome. Cayce insisted that the real message of the 40 days was not only about what happens after we die, but about how we live now. He often said that death simply magnifies who we already are. If you are bitter, that bitterness becomes your environment. If you are loving, that love becomes your light. Nothing is added, nothing is taken away, only revealed. This is why he encouraged people to stop living as if spirituality could be postponed until old age or until crisis forced them to think about it. The afterlife is shaped not by last-minute prayers, but by the steady pattern of a lifetime. Every choice, every word, every thought builds the ground you will stand on when the body falls away. Think of your daily life. You get frustrated in traffic. You argue with someone you love. You carry stress from work. These moments may feel small, but Cayce taught that every reaction plants a seed in the soul. Over time, those seeds grow into forests, some bright with fruit, others tangled with thorns. When death comes, you walk through the forest you planted. There is no escape from it, but there is also no unfairness. The forest is yours, and if you do not like what you see, you can start planting differently. Today, acts of kindness are seeds of light. Forgiveness is water that clears the soil. Gratitude is the sunlight that makes everything grow. This is how you prepare for the 40 days. Not through fear or desperate last-minute efforts, but through conscious living that builds spiritual strength day by day. Research in psychology and hospice care supports this understanding. Studies show that people who cultivate compassion, gratitude, and forgiveness not only live longer but also face death with more peace. Hospice workers often report that those who lived with love die more gently, while those who lived in fear or anger struggle to let go. These observations echo Cayce's teachings perfectly. The state of the soul at death is not random. It is the natural harvest of the life lived. This is not superstition. It is a law of consciousness. So ask yourself honestly, what harvest are you preparing? If your life ended today, would you face those 40 days with courage or with regret? Would your soul feel light enough to rise or heavy with what you refuse to release? These are not questions meant to scare but to awaken, because the 40 days are not punishment, they are revelation. They are your soul showing you what you built. And the good news is that you are still building. Every moment is a chance to shift, to plant new seeds, to reshape the forest. You are never too late. Until your last breath, you can prepare. And the soul will carry that preparation like treasure when the crossing comes. Imagine standing at the edge of a great ocean. Behind you lies the land of the living, familiar, noisy, filled with routines. Before you stretches an endless horizon, the unknown of eternity. Death is the moment you step into the water, and the first 40 days are the crossing of that ocean. Some souls float with ease, carried by the current of love they cultivated in life. Others thrash and struggle, weighed down by stones of regret and resentment. The ocean does not punish. It simply reflects the weight or the lightness of what you bring. This is the image Cayce's words invite us to carry, that we are preparing our crossing every single day, with every single choice. He also made clear that death does not end relationships. The bonds we create with others extend far beyond the grave. When we love someone, that love becomes a bridge. When we harm someone, that harm becomes a chain. Both follow us into the 40 days. This is why forgiveness of others and of ourselves is one of the most powerful tools we have. To forgive is to untie the knots that would otherwise hold us back. To forgive is to walk lighter across the ocean. And when we refuse, when we cling to bitterness, the weight is ours to carry. Cayce reminded us, no one can release us but ourselves. But the beauty of his message is that we are never alone. Guides appear, soul groups await, and higher realms open once the lessons are embraced. Even in the darkest reflections of the intermediate plane, a light remains available. A whisper calls, you can let go, you can rise. The only question is whether the soul listens. And this is why preparing now matters so much. The more we learn to release while alive, the easier it becomes to hear that whisper after death. Now bring this closer to your own heart. Think of your family, your friends, those you love most deeply. One day, each of them will begin this crossing. And one day, so will you. How do you want to be remembered in their review? When they stand at their life's mirror, do you want to be the reason they feel warmth or the reason they feel pain? Every interaction leaves an imprint. Every connection is eternal. And when we realize this, life stops being ordinary. Every moment becomes sacred. Every encounter becomes an opportunity to plant light that will echo into eternity. So now, as we near the end of this journey, let us bring the message full circle. The 40 days after death are not a mystery reserved for prophets or mystics. They are the destiny of every soul, including yours. And the secret Cayce wanted humanity to understand is that the afterlife is not separate from life. It is its continuation. What you do now, how you think, how you love, how you forgive, all of it builds the path you will one day walk. There are no shortcuts. There are no cheats. There is only truth revealed. Imagine waking tomorrow with the certainty that everything you do echoes forever. Would you treat others differently? Would you carry yourself with more patience? Would you take the time to forgive before it's too late? The 40 days remind us that nothing is wasted. Even the smallest act, a smile to a stranger, a kind word in a tense moment, a prayer whispered in silence. These ripple outward, becoming part of your eternal environment. When you stand in the light of your higher self, these ripples surround you, testifying to the life you lived. And here lies the power. You are not trapped by your past. You are not condemned by your mistakes. Cayce emphasized that growth is always possible, even beyond death. But why wait? Why postpone peace until you're forced to face it? Every step of awareness you take now makes the crossing easier. Every act of love lightens your path. Every choice to live consciously is like laying stones on a bridge you will one day need to walk. One day, you will take your last breath. But that day does not need to be feared. It can be a doorway you approach with courage, knowing you are prepared. Now close your eyes and imagine your own final moment. Years from now, when your time comes, you exhale one last time. And in the stillness, you awaken. You see the faces of those who left before you smiling. You hear their thoughts, you feel their embrace. You realize you are not ending, you are beginning. You rise into awareness, not as a body, but as a soul eternal. Fear is gone. Confusion dissolves. You know the truth. You are more than flesh. You are more than memory. You are eternal light. That is the gift of Cayce's message. That is the truth hidden in the 40 days. And so, we arrive at the end of our journey through the 40 days. What began with the silence of a final breath ends with the awakening of the soul into a new chapter of existence. Edgar Cayce's insights give us a map, not to frighten us, but to free us. They show us that death is not chaos, not punishment, but order, process, and opportunity. The soul does not vanish. It expands. It does not lose itself. It discovers itself. Each stage, the review, the guides, the reflections, the memories, the meeting with the higher self, the reunion with the soul group is not random. It is the curriculum of eternity. And you are the student. This knowledge is not meant to make us morbid. It is meant to make us alive. Because when you truly understand that your thoughts shape eternity, you begin to live with more intention. When you know that love is the only currency that lasts, you begin to invest in what truly matters. When you realize that forgiveness unties knots that could otherwise bind you forever, you begin to release what once seemed impossible. Cayce's message is not about waiting for death. It is about transforming life. So the question returns, what are you doing today that your soul will thank you for tomorrow? Will you plant seeds of light, or will you leave your path cluttered with thorns? Will you carry grudges, or will you set yourself free? Will you waste your time chasing what fades, or will you build treasures that echo into eternity? The 40 days will reveal the answers, but you decide them here, now. And every day is another chance to choose wisely. If this message touched your heart, share your thoughts in the comments below. Tell us where you are watching from. Tell us what resonated with you. Tell us how these words moved you. If your comment adds to the conversation, we will mark it with a heart as a sign of gratitude. And do not forget, subscribe, turn on notifications, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Because death is not the end, it is the beginning of something greater. And the more we understand that, the less we fear and the more fully we live. So carry this knowledge with you. Let it shape your choices. Let it deepen your compassion. Let it guide you to live in a way that your soul will celebrate in eternity. Remember Cayce's timeless truth. You are not a human being trying to have a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And when your 40 days begin, may you walk them with courage, with light, and with love. This preparation stage involves careful planning and consultation with what Cayce called the Council of Souls, or advanced spiritual guides. In one reading, he described these councils as groups of highly evolved souls who have completed their earthly sojourns and now serve to guide others in their spiritual development. These councils operate under divine law and help souls make wise choices about their next incarnation based on spiritual need rather than personal preference. Together with these counselors, souls review their current development, identify areas needing growth or healing, and select circumstances for the next incarnation that will best serve their evolution. Another reading provides extensive detail about this planning process. The soul, in consultation with its guides, examines what has been learned and what remains to be mastered. They consider which earthly experiences would best provide opportunities to develop needed spiritual qualities, such as patience, compassion, forgiveness, or humility. Cayce emphasized that souls actively participate in choosing their next life circumstances, though not always in ways that human personality would prefer. In one reading, he explained, "The soul chooses not for comfort or ease, but for maximum spiritual growth. A soul needing to develop patience might choose a life filled with delays and obstacles. One needing to learn compassion might choose to experience suffering or to care for others who suffer. This includes selecting parents, cultural environment, historical period, and even physical characteristics that will provide optimal opportunities for growth." Another reading describes how souls consider the karmic connections they have with potential parents. Often souls choose to incarnate with others they have known in previous lives, either to heal relationships that were damaged or to continue working together on shared spiritual goals. The readings describe how souls often choose to reincarnate with groups they've known in previous lifetimes. In one reading, Cayce explained that soul groups, collections of souls who have interacted across multiple incarnations, often plan their returns together, taking on different family roles and relationships to provide mutual learning opportunities. A soul who was a parent in one life might return as a child to a former child, or enemies in one life might return as siblings to learn forgiveness and cooperation. This preparation stage also involves the soul reviewing spiritual laws and principles it needs to remember and apply in physical existence. Another reading describes memory banks, where souls store the wisdom they've gained in spiritual realms. While conscious memory of these teachings may fade after birth, they remain embedded in the soul's deeper awareness and can be accessed through prayer, meditation, and spiritual seeking. Some souls require extensive preparation, particularly if they're planning to incarnate into challenging circumstances or take on significant spiritual responsibilities. In one reading, Cayce described souls who spend long periods in training academies, where they develop specific abilities they'll need in their coming incarnation. A soul planning to serve as a healer might study energy manipulation, while one destined for spiritual teaching might develop communication and wisdom abilities. The readings also describe how souls sometimes choose difficult incarnations, specifically to balance previous negative actions. This isn't punishment imposed from outside, but the soul's own recognition of spiritual debt that needs balancing. In another reading, Cayce explained, if a soul caused suffering to others in a previous life, it may choose to experience similar suffering to truly understand the consequences of its actions and develop compassion for those it harmed. Cayce described how the preparation process includes what he called incarnation blueprints, detailed plans that outline the soul's major learning objectives, key relationships, and significant challenges for the coming lifetime. One reading explains that these blueprints are flexible rather than fixed. The soul plans general themes and major learning opportunities, but maintains free will to choose how to respond to these experiences. The blueprint provides structure, but the soul's choices determine the actual outcome. The timing of reincarnation varies greatly according to Cayce's readings. In another reading, he explained that souls don't reincarnate on a fixed schedule, but return when conditions are optimal for their growth. Some souls return relatively quickly, drawn by strong desires or urgent learning needs. Others may spend extensive periods in spiritual realms, either because they need healing, have service work to complete, or because the optimal circumstances for their next incarnation haven't yet manifested on Earth. The preparation stage also involves what Cayce called energy adjustment, the gradual modification of the soul's vibration to match the denser frequencies of physical existence. One reading describes this process. The soul must lower its vibrational rate slowly and carefully to avoid shock when entering dense matter. This adjustment process can take considerable time and is overseen by specialists who ensure the soul's energy patterns remain intact during the transition. Advanced souls often spend extensive time in preparation because they're planning incarnations involving significant service to humanity. In another reading, Cayce described how some souls prepare for lifetimes as spiritual teachers, healers, or leaders by studying with master teachers and developing specific abilities they'll need. These preparation periods might span centuries of Earth time as the soul develops wisdom and capabilities for its coming mission. The readings indicate that preparation includes selecting not only major life circumstances, but also seemingly minor details that will provide important learning opportunities. One reading mentions how souls might choose specific talents, interests, or even health challenges that will guide them toward their planned spiritual development. A soul planning to learn about service might choose a physical limitation that requires dependence on others, while one needing to develop strength might choose circumstances requiring unusual courage and perseverance. Stage 6. Edgar Cayce and the Soul's Journey, a spiritual perspective on life, death, and reincarnation. Throughout human history, one question has persisted across all cultures and civilizations: what happens to our consciousness after physical death? This universal inquiry found a unique perspective through the work of Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, who for over 4 decades provided thousands of psychic readings on various topics, including the nature of the soul and its journey beyond earthly life. Edgar Cayce, 1877-1945, was one of the most documented psychics in modern history. His readings, psychic consultations given while in a trance state, were meticulously recorded and today form one of the largest collections of psychic material ever compiled. Unlike many esoteric traditions that keep their teachings secret, Cayce's work was extensively documented and studied, offering a consistent perspective on fundamental spiritual questions. In Cayce's readings about life after death, we find not a single moment of transition, but rather what he described as a continuous journey of consciousness. According to his teachings, the soul follows patterns and stages that reflect universal spiritual laws. While different readings emphasized various aspects of this journey, several consistent themes emerge that can help us understand what Cayce taught about the soul's experience after physical death. If you've ever wondered about the nature of consciousness beyond physical life, or if you're seeking comfort regarding loved ones who have passed, Cayce's perspective offers both insight and hope. His teachings suggest that death is not an ending, but a transformation, a doorway into expanded awareness and continued growth. Before we explore these teachings in detail, it's important to understand that Cayce's readings present spiritual perspectives rather than scientific facts. They offer one viewpoint among many about life's greatest mysteries. Whether you approach these ideas as literal truth, metaphorical wisdom, or simply food for thought, they contain profound insights about how we might live more consciously in preparation for whatever lies beyond. Central to understanding Cayce's perspective on the afterlife is his fundamental teaching that mind is the builder. This wasn't merely a phrase about earthly existence. According to Cayce, it represents a universal law that continues beyond physical death. The readings consistently emphasized that consciousness, with all its patterns of thought, emotion, and belief, survives the transition we call death. In Cayce's view, the soul doesn't undergo a sudden transformation at the moment of death. Instead, it carries forward the mental and emotional patterns developed during physical life. This perspective suggests that preparation for the afterlife happens not through rituals or last-minute conversions, but through the daily cultivation of consciousness during our earthly existence. The readings describe how our thoughts, attitudes, and spiritual development shape not only our current experience but also our condition in the spiritual realms. This isn't presented as judgment from an external deity, but as a natural consequence of spiritual law. The idea that consciousness creates experience both in physical and non-physical dimensions. When Edgar Cayce spoke about the journey of consciousness after death, he described it as following natural patterns and stages. While the specific details varied across different readings, several consistent phases emerge from his extensive body of work. Understanding these phases, according to Cayce, helps us comprehend not only what may await us after death, but also how our current choices and mental states are already shaping that future experience. Cayce often compared death to falling asleep, not in the sense of unconsciousness, but in the gentle transition from one state of awareness to another. He emphasized that for those who have lived with spiritual awareness and inner peace, the transition is smooth and natural. For those carrying fear, resentment, or strong material attachments, the passage may involve more difficulty, not as punishment, but as the natural result of resistance to spiritual law. The readings suggest that loved ones who have passed before often assist in this transition. Cayce described how souls rarely make this passage entirely alone. There are always helping presences, whether recognized or not, who guide and comfort the departing consciousness. This aspect of his teachings has brought comfort to many who grieve, suggesting that death is not abandonment, but reunion with those who have gone before. What makes Cayce's perspective unique is its practical nature. Rather than abstract theological concepts, his readings offer detailed descriptions of what consciousness experiences as it moves through various stages of existence beyond physical life. These descriptions, drawn from thousands of individual readings, present a coherent view of the afterlife as an active, purposeful continuation of the soul's development. The spiritual dimensions Cayce described are not static realms of eternal reward or punishment, but dynamic environments where consciousness continues to grow, learn, and serve. According to his readings, the soul remains active between earthly incarnations, engaging in various forms of learning, healing, and service that prepare it for future growth opportunities. One of the most profound aspects of Cayce's teachings is the emphasis on personal responsibility. The readings consistently indicate that each soul creates its own experience through the power of consciousness. This places both the challenge and the hope squarely with the individual. We are not victims of arbitrary divine judgment, but active participants in shaping our eternal destiny through our daily choices and inner development. The concept of reincarnation appears throughout Cayce's work, not as endless repetition, but as purposeful return to physical existence for continued learning and service. According to the readings, souls don't reincarnate randomly, but choose circumstances that best serve their spiritual development and the opportunity to balance previous actions through love and service. This perspective transforms how we might view our current life circumstances. Challenges, relationships, and opportunities are not mere coincidences, but carefully chosen experiences designed to advance the soul's growth. This doesn't mean we're trapped by fate, but rather that we're active participants in a cosmic curriculum designed for our highest development. Cayce's readings also address the question of time in spiritual dimensions. According to his perspective, consciousness in the afterlife is not bound by linear time as we experience it in physical life. This allows for what he described as instantaneous understanding and experience that transcends the gradual learning process we know on Earth. The healing aspect of the afterlife features prominently in Cayce's descriptions. He spoke of spiritual hospitals or restoration centers where souls wounded by trauma, hatred, or destructive patterns receive healing and rehabilitation. This reinforces the idea that no soul is ever beyond hope or help, that divine mercy provides opportunities for healing and renewal regardless of past mistakes or suffering. Understanding these general principles provides the foundation for exploring what Cayce described as the specific stages or phases of the soul's journey after physical death. While these stages shouldn't be viewed as rigid categories, they offer a framework for understanding the natural progression of consciousness as it adapts to and grows within spiritual dimensions. Stage 1. The moment of separation. According to Cayce's readings, the first stage begins with what he described as the loosening of the silver cord, the energetic connection between the physical body and the soul. This separation is portrayed not as a violent rupture, but as a gentle release, often compared to the natural process of falling asleep. In one of his readings, Cayce explained, "The silver cord is broken. That cord through which life, as manifested in the physical consciousness, has its connection with soul and spirit." He described this cord as extending from the brain through what he called the Leyden gland, likely referring to the pineal gland, connecting the physical consciousness to the soul body. The breaking of this cord doesn't happen instantly, but rather gradually, like a rope slowly unraveling strand by strand. The readings suggest that this initial separation can vary greatly depending on the individual's spiritual condition and circumstances of death. In one reading, Cayce described how those who have lived with spiritual ideals experience what he called a glorious transition, where the soul slips away as gently as the morning mist rises from the water. For those who have developed strong spiritual foundations through prayer, meditation, and service to others, the separation feels natural and peaceful. However, for others, particularly those who die suddenly or who have strong attachments to physical life, the process may involve more confusion or resistance. Cayce explained in another reading that souls who are earthbound by desires, appetites, or unfulfilled longings may struggle against the separation, creating what he described as a wrestling between the physical and spiritual bodies. This resistance doesn't prevent the transition but can make it more difficult and prolonged. During this stage, Cayce described how consciousness may hover between two states of awareness, still sensing the physical environment while beginning to perceive spiritual dimensions. In several readings, he mentioned that souls often report being able to see their physical body and observe the reactions of those around them, while simultaneously becoming aware of spiritual presences and dimensions previously invisible. This dual awareness can last from moments to several days, depending on the soul's preparedness and circumstances. The readings indicate that the soul's state of mind at the moment of death significantly influences this initial stage. In one reading, Cayce emphasized that what the soul has built in its mental and spiritual self determines the ease or difficulty of this transition. Fear, regret, or desperate clinging to physical life can create what he called etheric storms that make the separation turbulent and confusing. Conversely, trust, peace, and spiritual surrender create what he described as harmonious vibrations that facilitate a smoother passage. Cayce also described how loved ones who have passed before often become present during this stage, offering comfort and guidance to the departing soul. In another reading, he explained that these helping souls stand ready to assist and often appear to the departing consciousness in forms they would recognize and find comforting. Sometimes they appear as they were in physical life, other times in more radiant spiritual forms. These presences serve as bridges between the physical and spiritual worlds, helping ease the transition. The readings also mention that the soul's beliefs about death significantly impact this stage. Those who believe death is final may struggle more with the transition, while those who understand it as a doorway to continued existence move through more easily. Cayce emphasized in one reading that preparation should include not just moral and spiritual development, but also proper understanding of death as a natural spiritual process. He recommended studying spiritual teachings about the afterlife and practicing meditation to become familiar with expanded states of consciousness. Interestingly, Cayce described how the physical body itself responds during this separation process. In one reading, he mentioned that the soul gradually withdraws from the extremities first, hands and feet, then progressively from other organs, with the final connection being through the brain and nervous system. This explains why some people report feeling cold or numb in their hands and feet as death approaches, and why consciousness often remains clear until the very end. The timing of this separation process varies considerably according to the readings. For some, particularly those ready spiritually, it can happen quickly and peacefully. For others, especially those with strong earthly attachments or unresolved issues, the process may extend over several days. Cayce explained that the soul doesn't fully separate until it's ready to let go of physical concerns and accept its spiritual destiny. Stage 2. The period of rest and adjustment. Following the initial separation, Cayce described what he often called a period of sleep or rest. This isn't unconsciousness in the ordinary sense, but rather a state of adjustment where the soul acclimates to its new condition. Just as a newborn requires time to adapt to physical existence, the newly departed soul needs time to orient itself to spiritual reality. In one reading, Cayce explained this stage in detail. The soul entity passes through that experience as a babe passes into what we call sleep, that condition wherein the physical consciousness is laid aside and the soul communes with those influences that are ever present but not ordinarily aware to the physical consciousness. This spiritual sleep serves multiple purposes, functioning as both rest and preparation for the expanded awareness that follows. The duration of this rest period varies according to Cayce's readings, and he provided specific insights about what determines this timing. In another reading, he explained that souls who lived with strong spiritual ideals and understanding awaken relatively quickly, sometimes within what would be equivalent to days or weeks in earthly time. However, those who died suddenly, violently, or while carrying heavy emotional burdens may remain in this restful state for much longer periods. Cayce described several factors that influence the length of this sleep period. Souls who died with unresolved guilt often require extended rest while healing energies work to dissolve these burdens. In one reading, he mentioned that those who lived primarily for material gain or physical pleasures need more time to adjust to a reality where such things don't exist. Conversely, those who developed strong prayer lives and meditation practices during earthly existence adapt more quickly to spiritual consciousness. During this stage, the soul is surrounded by what Cayce called healing forces that work to restore balance and clarity. In another reading, he described these as emanations of divine love that flow from higher spiritual beings who specialize in assisting newly departed souls. These healing energies work to dissolve fear, guilt, and confusion, while strengthening the soul's natural spiritual radiance. The readings reveal that this period also serves to gradually dissolve the soul's attachment to physical sensations and material concerns. Cayce explained in one reading that the soul must learn to function without the 5 physical senses and instead develop what he called spiritual perception. This is a fundamental shift, from receiving information through eyes, ears, and touch to directly knowing through consciousness itself. Some souls use this rest period to resolve internal conflicts or heal emotional wounds that were carried from earthly life. In another reading, Cayce described how souls often review and process traumatic experiences during this sleep, with the assistance of what he called healing angels, or advanced souls who specialize in emotional restoration. The peaceful environment and absence of physical stress allow for deep healing that wouldn't be possible while incarnated. Cayce also explained that during this rest period, the soul begins to remember its true nature and purpose. In one reading, he described how earthly personality gradually gives way to soul identity, the eternal self that has existed through multiple incarnations. This remembering process can be gradual and gentle for prepared souls, or more dramatic for those who lived primarily through ego consciousness. The readings describe different types of rest environments tailored to individual needs. Some souls rest in what Cayce called gardens of peace, beautiful natural settings that provide comfort and tranquility. Others find themselves in temple-like structures where gentle instruction begins even during the rest period. In another reading, he mentioned that souls often rest near loved ones who passed before, creating family groupings that support mutual healing and adjustment. According to Cayce, no soul remains in this state indefinitely. Awakening always comes, though timing varies with individual needs. He explained in one reading that higher spiritual beings monitor each soul's progress and gently encourage awakening when the time is right. This awakening isn't forced, but occurs naturally as the soul completes its adjustment and becomes ready for more active spiritual experiences. The transition from this rest period to full spiritual awakening is described as gradual and beautiful. In another reading, Cayce compared it to dawn breaking, a slow, gentle increase in awareness and perception until the soul suddenly realizes it's fully conscious in a new realm of existence. This awakening marks the end of the adjustment period and the beginning of active engagement with spiritual realities. Stage 3. Awakening and attraction to spiritual spheres. When the soul awakens from its period of rest, Cayce described how it begins to perceive the spiritual dimensions around it. These aren't vague, ethereal realms, but substantial realities with their own characteristics and inhabitants. The key principle governing this stage is what Cayce consistently described as the law of attraction, like attracts like. In one of his readings, Cayce provided detailed descriptions of this awakening process. As the soul entity awakens to the consciousness of its spiritual self, it finds itself drawn by the very nature of its being to that sphere, that realm, that condition which is in accord with what it has built within itself during its sojourns in the earth. This attraction operates through what he called spiritual magnetism, an automatic natural force that draws similar vibrations together. The readings describe multiple spiritual spheres or planes, each with distinct characteristics corresponding to different levels of spiritual development. Cayce mentioned in one reading that there are many mansions in the spiritual realm, referencing the biblical passage while explaining that these represent actual dimensional spaces where souls of similar development congregate and continue their growth. For souls whose consciousness has been developed through love, service, and spiritual growth, this attraction leads to what Cayce called realms of light. In another reading, he described these environments as filled with colors beyond earthly imagination and music that is the harmony of the spheres themselves. These realms are populated by souls who radiate love and engage in activities of learning, creating, and serving others. Cayce provided specific details about these higher realms in various readings. In one reading, he described temples of wisdom, where souls study universal laws under the guidance of master teachers. He mentioned halls of healing, where souls learn to work with spiritual energies to assist others, and gardens of beauty, where souls engage in creative activities that express divine harmony through what earthly minds might recognize as art, music, and poetry. Conversely, souls burdened by hatred, selfishness, or destructive patterns find themselves attracted to what Cayce called the borderland, or lower spheres. These aren't places of eternal punishment, but rather environments that reflect the soul's inner condition and provide opportunities for recognition and eventual healing of negative patterns. In one reading, he described these as gray realms, where souls struggle with the very attitudes and desires that drew them there. These lower spheres serve a corrective purpose, according to Cayce's readings. In another reading, he explained that souls in these conditions eventually become dissatisfied with their environment and begin to seek something better. This seeking creates the motivation for growth and change. Advanced souls from higher realms often work as counselors and guides in these areas, helping trapped souls recognize their condition and choose differently. Cayce emphasized that this attraction is not imposed by external judgment, but operates as a natural law of spiritual existence. In one reading, he explained, "The soul finds itself where its consciousness has prepared a place for it. This is not judgment from without, but the natural consequence of spiritual law that consciousness creates experience." The soul cannot hide from itself in these dimensions. Its true nature becomes evident and shapes its immediate environment. The readings describe how souls often experience surprise or shock when they first recognize their environment, especially if it doesn't match their earthly self-image. In another reading, Cayce mentioned that souls who considered themselves religious or moral during earthly life, but harbored prejudice, judgment, or spiritual pride, might find themselves in less elevated spheres than expected. Conversely, souls who lived with genuine love and service, regardless of their religious affiliation or lack thereof, gravitate toward higher realms. Within these spheres, souls encounter others of similar development, creating communities of consciousness that support mutual growth and understanding. Cayce described in one reading how souls often reunite with those they've known in previous lifetimes, continuing relationships and working together on shared spiritual goals. These reunions aren't always pleasant. Souls may encounter those they harmed in past lives, creating opportunities for forgiveness and healing. The law of attraction in spiritual realms also operates on a more subtle level, according to Cayce's readings. In another reading, he explained that souls are drawn not only to general spheres, but to specific areas within those spheres that match their particular interests and needs. A soul with musical inclinations might find itself in areas where celestial harmony is studied and practiced, while one drawn to healing might gravitate toward regions where restorative arts are taught and applied. Cayce also described how the environment itself responds to the collective consciousness of its inhabitants. In one reading, he mentioned that in higher spheres the thoughts and emotions of loving souls create increasingly beautiful and harmonious surroundings, while in lower spheres, negative mental patterns manifest as restrictive or unpleasant conditions. This creates a feedback loop where environment and consciousness mutually influence each other. The transition between spheres is possible according to the readings, but it requires genuine transformation of consciousness. In another reading, Cayce explained that souls cannot simply decide to move to a higher sphere. They must actually develop the spiritual qualities that would naturally attract them there. This development often happens through service to other souls in lower conditions, which builds the love and compassion necessary for spiritual advancement. Stage 4. The Life Review. One of the most consistently described experiences in Cayce's readings is what he called the Life Review, a comprehensive examination of the soul's recent earthly existence. This review is not conducted by external judges, but is guided by the soul's own higher self, that aspect of consciousness that maintains clear spiritual perspective beyond ego and illusion. According to Cayce, this review involves more than simple memory recall. In one reading, he described it as a reliving of every experience, every thought, every action from the perspective of universal law. The soul actually re-experiences its life from multiple perspectives, feeling not only its own experiences, but also the effects of its actions on others. Every thought, word, and deed is examined in the light of spiritual truth, revealing the true impact of the soul's choices. This process can be profoundly humbling for souls who caused harm to others, as they directly experience the pain they inflicted. In another reading, Cayce explained, "As the entity reviews its life, it feels within itself all that it gave to others, the joys and the sorrows, the help and the hurt. There is no hiding from the self in this examination. Conversely, it can be deeply affirming for those who lived with compassion and service, as they feel the positive effects they created rippling through other lives." The review is thorough and honest, leaving no room for self-deception or rationalization. Cayce described in one reading how souls often express amazement at seeing their earthly life from this expanded perspective. The entity sees how small actions created great effects, how seemingly insignificant moments of kindness brought healing to others, and how thoughtless words or deeds created suffering that spread far beyond what was imagined. Cayce emphasized that this life review is not about condemnation, but about understanding and learning. In another reading, he explained, "The purpose is not punishment, but instruction. The soul must understand the consequences of free will choices in order to make better choices in future opportunities for growth. The soul sees clearly what it failed to recognize during earthly life, the interconnectedness of all actions, and the responsibility that comes with free will." The reading suggests that this review is conducted in the presence of what Cayce called the recording angels, or keepers of the records, advanced spiritual beings who help the soul process and understand its experiences. In one reading, he described these entities as beings of pure love who have transcended judgment and serve only to illuminate truth and assist understanding. These guides don't judge, but rather help illuminate the spiritual lessons embedded in earthly experiences. During this process, the soul encounters what Cayce referred to as the Book of Life. Not a literal book, but the complete energetic record of every soul's existence across all incarnations. In another reading, he explained that this record is maintained in what he called the Akashic Records, a cosmic library where every thought, action, and experience is permanently stored and can be accessed for learning and growth. For many souls, the life review reveals the need for forgiveness, both giving and receiving. Cayce described in one reading how souls often discover that people they thought had wronged them were actually providing necessary learning experiences, while realizing they themselves had created harm through thoughtlessness or selfishness. This recognition creates powerful motivation for healing relationships in future incarnations. The review also reveals patterns that may have operated below conscious awareness during earthly life. In another reading, Cayce described how souls see recurring themes across their recent lifetime, perhaps a pattern of avoiding responsibility, or a tendency toward jealousy, or a habit of seeking control over others. These patterns become visible as threads running through many different situations and relationships. Cayce explained that the emotional intensity of this review varies depending on how the soul lived. In one reading, he noted that souls who practiced regular self-examination during earthly life experienced the review as largely confirmation of what they already knew about themselves. However, souls who avoided self-reflection or lived largely unconsciously may find the experience overwhelming, requiring assistance from spiritual counselors to process the revelations. The review process also illuminates the soul's spiritual growth during the recent lifetime. Cayce described in another reading how souls can see exactly when and how they made progress, moments when they chose love over fear, service over selfishness, forgiveness over resentment. These moments shine like lights in the review, showing the soul its authentic spiritual achievements. Interestingly, the readings indicate that this review includes not only actions and their consequences, but also missed opportunities. In one reading, Cayce mentioned that souls see the roads not taken, moments when they could have chosen differently, situations where they could have helped others or grown spiritually, but failed to recognize the opportunity. This isn't shown to create regret, but to increase awareness for future choices. The life review concludes with what Cayce called the weighing, not a judgment imposed from outside, but the soul's own recognition of its spiritual condition based on the complete evidence of its recent life. In another reading, he explained that this weighing determines the soul's next steps, whether it needs healing, further learning, service opportunities, or preparation for another incarnation. Stage 5. Activity in spiritual realms. Following the life review, souls don't remain idle but engage in various forms of activity within the spiritual dimensions. Cayce's descriptions of these activities vary widely, reflecting the diverse needs and development levels of different souls, but all serve the purpose of continued growth and service. Some souls remain relatively close to the earth plane, drawn by unfinished business or concern for loved ones still in physical life. In one reading, Cayce described these as earthbound entities who haven't fully accepted their transition and continue to attempt communication with the physical world. However, he distinguished between souls who are trapped by negative attachments and those who choose to remain near Earth for constructive purposes, such as guiding and protecting family members. These earthbound souls may attempt to communicate with or assist those on Earth, though their ability to do so depends on various factors. In another reading, Cayce explained that successful communication requires both the departed soul's development of spiritual communication abilities and the living person's receptivity and sensitivity. He described how some souls learn to influence dreams, inspire sudden insights, or create synchronistic events to convey messages to loved ones. Other souls move into what Cayce described as realms of learning or universities of the soul. In one reading, he provided detailed descriptions of these educational environments. There are institutions of learning where souls study the laws of creation, the nature of divine love, and the principles governing spiritual evolution. These schools are more real and substantial than earthly universities, for learning happens through direct knowing rather than intellectual study. These educational realms operate according to different principles than earthly learning. In another reading, Cayce explained that souls absorb knowledge directly through consciousness rather than through reading or listening. Advanced teacher souls share their understanding through what he called thought transmission, a form of communication where complete concepts and experiences are shared instantaneously. Students in these schools might study the mathematics of creation, the harmony of celestial music, or the healing properties of divine light. Cayce also described realms of service, where souls assist in various forms of healing and guidance work. In one reading, he mentioned souls who specialize in helping newly departed entities adjust to spiritual existence, serving as counselors and guides for those struggling with the transition. Other souls work with those still on Earth by providing inspiration and subtle guidance, often operating through what humans perceive as intuition or sudden insights. Particularly significant in Cayce's descriptions are what he called healing centers or hospitals of the soul. Another reading provides extensive detail about these facilities. There are realms dedicated entirely to the restoration of souls damaged by trauma, violence, hatred, or despair. These centers are staffed by master healers who work with pure spiritual energy to repair and restore the soul's natural radiance and harmony. This healing work addresses not only damage from the recent lifetime, but also accumulated wounds from multiple incarnations. The healing process in these centers involves what Cayce called light therapy, the application of divine energies that dissolve negative patterns and restore spiritual wholeness. In one reading, he described how souls undergoing this healing are immersed in pools of living light that penetrate every aspect of their being, dissolving fear, guilt, anger, and despair while strengthening their connection to divine love. The readings describe how souls may move between different types of activity as their needs and development change. Some alternate between learning and service, while others focus intensively on healing work, either for themselves or others. In another reading, Cayce explained that this variety serves the soul's need for balanced development. As a soul grows in one area, it naturally seeks to express that growth through service, which then reveals new areas needing development. Throughout these activities, souls continue to interact with others they've known in various lifetimes, working together on shared spiritual goals and healing relationships that may have been damaged in physical existence. One reading describes how soul groups, collections of souls who have interacted across multiple lifetimes, often work together in spiritual realms, supporting each other's growth and preparing for future incarnations together. Cayce described specialized service roles that some souls undertake. In another reading, he mentioned guardian souls who take responsibility for watching over specific individuals or families on Earth, providing protection and guidance. Other souls become inspirational agents who work to inspire creativity, scientific discovery, or spiritual awakening in those still incarnated. Some serve as intercession souls who help transmit prayers and spiritual requests between earthly and divine realms. The concept of spiritual creativity features prominently in these descriptions. One reading explains how souls in higher realms engage in divine artistry, creating beauty through pure thought and spiritual energy. These creations aren't art as humans understand it, but expressions of spiritual truth that can inspire and uplift other souls. Music in these realms consists of harmonies that express cosmic principles, while visual arts manifest the very essence of divine qualities like love, joy, and peace. Cayce also described souls who work in what he called laboratories of consciousness, realms where advanced souls study the mechanisms of creation itself. In another reading, he mentioned souls who investigate the building blocks of reality and learn to work with the fundamental forces that shape both spiritual and physical worlds. This knowledge prepares them for eventual roles as co-creators with divine intelligence. The duration of activity in these realms varies enormously according to the readings. Some souls spend relatively brief periods before choosing to reincarnate, while others may engage in spiritual realm activities for centuries or even millennia of Earth time. In one reading, Cayce explained that time itself operates differently in spiritual dimensions, with some souls accomplishing vast amounts of learning and service in what seems like brief periods, while others take extensive time to heal or develop specific spiritual qualities. Stage 6. Preparation for return. Eventually, most souls begin preparation for return to physical existence. According to Cayce's readings, reincarnation is not a punishment or endless cycle, but a purposeful return designed to provide specific learning opportunities that advance the soul's spiritual development. This preparation stage involves careful planning and consultation with what Cayce called the Council of Souls, or advanced spiritual guides. In one reading, he described these councils as groups of highly evolved souls who have completed their earthly sojourns and now serve to guide others in their spiritual development. These councils operate under divine law and help souls make wise choices about their next incarnation based on spiritual need rather than personal preference. Together with these counselors, souls review their current development, identify areas needing growth or healing, and select circumstances for the next incarnation that will best serve their evolution. Another reading provides extensive detail about this planning process. The soul, in consultation with its guides, examines what has been learned and what remains to be mastered. They consider which earthly experiences would best provide opportunities to develop needed spiritual qualities, such as patience, compassion, forgiveness, or humility. Cayce emphasized that souls actively participate in choosing their next life circumstances, though not always in ways that human personality would prefer. In one reading, he explained, "The soul chooses not for comfort or ease, but for maximum spiritual growth." A soul needing to develop patience might choose a life filled with delays and obstacles. One needing to learn compassion might choose to experience suffering or to care for others who suffer. This includes selecting parents, cultural environment, historical period, and even physical characteristics that will provide optimal opportunities for growth. Another reading describes how souls consider the karmic connections they have with potential parents. Often souls choose to incarnate with others they have known in previous lives, either to heal relationships that were damaged or to continue working together on shared spiritual goals. The readings describe how souls often choose to reincarnate with groups they've known in previous lifetimes. In one reading, Cayce explained that soul groups, collections of souls who have interacted across multiple incarnations, often plan their returns together, taking on different family roles and relationships to provide mutual learning opportunities. A soul who was a parent in one life might return as a child to a former child, or enemies in one life might return as siblings to learn forgiveness and cooperation. This preparation stage also involves the soul reviewing spiritual laws and principles it needs to remember and apply in physical existence. Another reading describes memory banks, where souls store the wisdom they've gained in spiritual realms. While conscious memory of these teachings may fade after birth, they remain embedded in the soul's deeper awareness and can be accessed through prayer, meditation, and spiritual seeking. Some souls require extensive preparation, particularly if they're planning to incarnate into challenging circumstances or take on significant spiritual responsibilities. In one reading, Cayce described souls who spend long periods in training academies, where they develop specific abilities they'll need in their coming incarnation. A soul planning to serve as a healer might study energy manipulation, while one destined for spiritual teaching might develop communication and wisdom abilities. The readings also describe how souls sometimes choose difficult incarnations, specifically to balance previous negative actions. This isn't punishment imposed from outside, but the soul's own recognition of spiritual debt that needs balancing. In another reading, Cayce explained, if a soul caused suffering to others in a previous life, it may choose to experience similar suffering to truly understand the consequences of its actions and develop compassion for those it harmed. Cayce described how the preparation process includes what he called incarnation blueprints, detailed plans that outline the soul's major learning objectives, key relationships, and significant challenges for the coming lifetime. One reading explains that these blueprints are flexible rather than fixed. The soul plans general themes and major learning opportunities, but maintains free will to choose how to respond to these experiences. The blueprint provides structure, but the soul's choices determine the actual outcome. The timing of reincarnation varies greatly according to Cayce's readings. In another reading, he explained that souls don't reincarnate on a fixed schedule, but return when conditions are optimal for their growth. Some souls return relatively quickly, drawn by strong desires or urgent learning needs. Others may spend extensive periods in spiritual realms, either because they need healing, have service work to complete, or because the optimal circumstances for their next incarnation haven't yet manifested on Earth. The preparation stage also involves what Cayce called energy adjustment, the gradual modification of the soul's vibration to match the denser frequencies of physical existence. One reading describes this process. The soul must lower its vibrational rate slowly and carefully to avoid shock when entering dense matter. This adjustment process can take considerable time and is overseen by specialists who ensure the soul's energy patterns remain intact during the transition. Advanced souls often spend extensive time in preparation because they're planning incarnations involving significant service to humanity. In another reading, Cayce described how some souls prepare for lifetimes as spiritual teachers, healers, or leaders by studying with master teachers and developing specific abilities they'll need. These preparation periods might span centuries of Earth time as the soul develops wisdom and capabilities for its coming mission. The readings indicate that preparation includes selecting not only major life circumstances, but also seemingly minor details that will provide important learning opportunities. One reading mentions how souls might choose specific talents, interests, or even health challenges that will guide them toward their planned spiritual development. A soul planning to learn about service might choose a physical limitation that requires dependence on others, while one needing to develop strength might choose circumstances requiring unusual courage and perseverance. Stage 7. The return to physical existence. The final stage in Cayce's description involves the soul's gradual return to physical existence. This isn't an abrupt entry into a new body, but a progressive process that begins long before birth and continues for some time after. According to the readings, the soul becomes magnetically attracted to its chosen parents before conception occurs. In one reading, Cayce described this attraction as operating through spiritual resonance. The soul is drawn to parents whose combined energies will provide the exact genetic, emotional, and environmental conditions needed for its planned development. This attraction isn't based on the parents' conscious worthiness, but on their ability to provide specific learning opportunities the soul requires. The soul hovers near the family, influenced by and influencing the energies of the household, sometimes for months or even years before conception. Another reading explains this preliminary connection. The soul that will incarnate often begins influencing the family unit long before physical conception, helping to create conditions that will support its coming growth. This influence may manifest as changes in the parent's spiritual interests, relationship dynamics, or life circumstances. At conception, the soul begins the complex process of merging with the developing physical form. Cayce described this in one reading as a gradual wedding of spirit and matter that requires careful coordination between the soul's energy and the developing body's capacity to hold that energy. This merger isn't instantaneous but occurs progressively as the physical form develops sufficient complexity to house consciousness. Throughout pregnancy, the connection strengthens as the soul adjusts to operating through dense physical matter once again. Another reading provides detailed information about this process. During gestation, the soul works to align its energy patterns with the developing nervous system. The physical brain and body are gradually prepared to serve as vehicles for the soul's expression, though this preparation continues long after birth. Cayce described how the soul's presence affects fetal development and how the developing body is shaped by the soul's energy patterns. In one reading, he explained that the soul's vibrations influence not only physical development, but also the formation of personality tendencies, natural talents, and even health patterns that will manifest throughout the lifetime. This suggests that many characteristics we consider genetic are actually influenced by the incoming soul's spiritual nature. The readings indicate that the soul doesn't maintain constant connection during pregnancy, but moves in and out of the developing body as conditions permit. Another reading describes this variable connection. The soul may be fully present during some periods of gestation and partially withdrawn during others, depending on the body's developmental stage and the soul's ability to function through increasingly dense matter. Birth represents a critical transition point, but not the completion of the soul's incarnation process. Cayce explained in one reading that birth is the soul's commitment point, the moment when it fully accepts responsibility for expression through physical form, though complete integration may take years to accomplish. The trauma of birth itself can temporarily disrupt the soul's connection, requiring a period of restabilization. The readings suggest that young children often retain closer connection to spiritual awareness, which gradually fades as they adapt to physical reality and develop ego consciousness. Another reading describes how children up to age 7 often display memories, abilities, or knowledge that cannot be explained through their current life experience, because their connection to their soul self remains relatively strong during these early years. This gradual forgetting is described as both necessary and merciful, allowing the soul to fully engage with its chosen life circumstances without being overwhelmed by memories of spiritual existence or past lifetimes. However, one reading explains that the deeper lessons and purposes remain embedded in the soul's unconscious awareness, guiding choices and development throughout the lifetime, even when not consciously remembered. Cayce emphasized that each return to physical existence represents a sacred opportunity and responsibility. In another reading, he stated, Every incarnation is a privilege, a chance for the soul to work with divine creative forces in dense matter, to transform both itself and the world through love and service. The soul that returns brings gifts developed in spiritual realms and has the opportunity to manifest these gifts for the benefit of all. The cycle of death, spiritual development, and rebirth continues until the soul has mastered all lessons available through physical existence. One reading describes this graduation. When the soul has learned to consistently choose love over fear, service over selfishness, and wisdom over ignorance in all circumstances, it no longer requires incarnation for its development. It then moves on to higher forms of service in spiritual realms. However, Cayce noted that some highly developed souls choose to continue incarnating not for their own growth, but to serve humanity's spiritual evolution. Another reading explains, master souls often return repeatedly to serve as teachers, healers, and guides for less developed souls. Their incarnations are acts of sacrifice and love, designed to help lift human consciousness toward divine realization. The process of return also involves what Cayce called karmic integration, the soul's acceptance of responsibility for balancing previous actions through love and service. One reading describes how the soul carries forward both the consequences of past choices and the wisdom gained from previous experiences, creating a foundation for continued growth and the opportunity to transform any negative patterns through conscious spiritual effort. Understanding this complete cycle from Cayce's perspective transforms how we might view both life and death. If our current existence is part of an eternal journey of growth and service, then every experience becomes meaningful, every choice carries weight, and every moment offers opportunity for spiritual advancement. Death becomes not an ending to fear, but a graduation to prepare for, and life becomes the sacred workshop where souls develop the love and wisdom that serve them throughout eternity. Understanding these 7 stages provides insight not only into what may await us after death, but also into how we might live more consciously now. If our thoughts and actions are shaping our future spiritual experience, then every moment becomes an opportunity to build a foundation of wisdom, love, and service that will serve us well in whatever lies beyond. Cayce's teachings suggest that preparation for these stages happens through the daily cultivation of spiritual awareness. Practices like meditation, prayer, study of spiritual principles, and service to others all contribute to developing the consciousness that will navigate spiritual dimensions with clarity and purpose. The emphasis throughout Cayce's work is on hope and opportunity, rather than fear and judgment. Death is presented not as an end to be dreaded, but as a transition to be prepared for with faith and wisdom. The spiritual realms are not alien territories, but the soul's true home, where it can continue the eternal journey of growth, learning, and service in increasingly expanded awareness. Most importantly, these teachings remind us that love is the fundamental force operating throughout all these stages. Love guides the soul through transition, shapes its experience in spiritual realms, and motivates its return to physical existence. By cultivating love in our current life, love for others, love for growth, love for truth, and love for the divine, we prepare ourselves for whatever stages of existence await us in the eternal journey of the soul. Whether we view these teachings as literal descriptions or symbolic wisdom, they offer profound insights into living with greater consciousness, compassion, and purpose. They remind us that our choices matter not only for this lifetime, but for the ongoing evolution of our eternal spiritual nature. In sharing these perspectives from Edgar Cayce's extensive body of readings, we hope to contribute to your own spiritual understanding and preparation for life's greatest mystery. Whatever your beliefs about death and afterlife, may this exploration inspire you to live with greater awareness, kindness, and dedication to the spiritual growth that serves both yourself and all of humanity. Right now, at this very moment, your soul is already destined for a specific spiritual realm based on your current level of consciousness. America's greatest psychic, Edgar Cayce, documented exactly how this works through over 14,000 psychic readings that have been preserved word for word in Virginia Beach. In 1923, during one of his deepest trance states, Cayce shocked his stenographer when he began describing 7 distinct spiritual planes where souls reside between earthly incarnations. He didn't just name these realms, he explained exactly what determines which level your consciousness can access, and more importantly, how to elevate yourself to higher dimensions while you're still alive. Before we dive into these life-changing revelations, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell, because this information has been suppressed from mainstream spiritual teachings for nearly a century, and YouTube's algorithm doesn't always show content this profound to everyone who needs to see it. Here's the shocking truth that will change how you view your entire spiritual journey forever. In one of his most disturbing readings from the mid-1920s, Cayce revealed that most humans are completely unaware they're operating from the lowest spiritual frequency possible. They're trapped in what he called the material consciousness realm, a spiritual plane so dense with ego and physical attachment that souls can remain stuck there for hundreds of lifetimes. But wait, there's something even more disturbing that Cayce discovered about spiritual evolution. During a reading for a businessman in 1932, something unprecedented happened. Cayce's voice suddenly changed mid-reading, and he began speaking in what witnesses described as an otherworldly tone. He revealed that this man's soul had been cycling through the same spiritual level for over 800 years, because he kept making the same consciousness mistake in every incarnation. The stenographer, Gladys Davis, later wrote in her notes that she had never seen Cayce so agitated during a reading. When he awakened, he had no memory of what he'd said, but the message was crystal clear. This soul was trapped, and Cayce had just witnessed something that terrified even him. This changes everything we think we know about spiritual progress. You see, most people believe that simply living multiple lifetimes automatically leads to spiritual advancement. Cayce's readings prove this is completely false. In fact, he documented case after case of souls who had been reincarnating for millennia without ever moving beyond the first spiritual realm. Let me paint you a picture of what Cayce saw when he looked into the Akashic records, that cosmic library where every soul's journey is recorded. Imagine 7 towering levels of consciousness, each one representing a different frequency of spiritual awareness. At the bottom, you have what Cayce called the earthbound consciousness. Souls so attached to material desires, fear, and ego that they create their own spiritual prison. Here's what's truly shocking about this lowest realm. In one of his most documented cases, Cayce described souls who had been stuck there since ancient Atlantis, over 12,000 years ago. These weren't evil people. They were ordinary individuals who simply never learned to transcend their basic human impulses. They kept choosing comfort over growth, fear over love, and ego over service. But here's where it gets absolutely mind-blowing. Cayce revealed that these trapped souls don't even realize they're stuck. They believe they're making spiritual progress because they're going through the motions of earthly life, working, loving, struggling, dying, and being reborn, but their consciousness never actually evolves. They're like spiritual zombies, unconsciously repeating the same patterns lifetime after lifetime. Now, before you start panicking about your own spiritual level, let me share something that will give you hope. In 1944, just 1 year before his death, Cayce gave what many consider his most important reading about consciousness evolution. A woman from New York asked him directly, "How can I know which spiritual realm I'm operating from?" Cayce's answer was so profound that it's been studied by metaphysical researchers for 8 decades. He said that every human being receives constant signs about their spiritual frequency, but most people are too distracted by material concerns to notice them. These signs come through dreams, sudden insights, inexplicable coincidences, and what he called soul promptings, those moments when you know something is true even though you can't explain why. But wait, there's a specific test Cayce gave that can reveal your exact spiritual level right now. In one of his most practical readings, he outlined what he called the consciousness mirror technique. This isn't some abstract meditation practice. It's a practical method that takes less than 5 minutes and will show you exactly which spiritual realm your soul is currently accessing. Here's how it works, and I want you to try this right after watching this video. Cayce said that when you encounter someone who triggers strong negative emotions in you, anger, jealousy, judgment, or fear, you're actually looking at a reflection of your own unhealed consciousness. The intensity of your reaction reveals your spiritual frequency. If you react with immediate anger or judgment, you're operating from the first realm, material consciousness. If you feel compassion mixed with understanding, you're accessing higher frequencies. But if you can see that person as a soul having a human experience just like you and feel genuine love for their journey, you're operating from what Cayce called the Christ consciousness, the highest spiritual realm accessible while in physical form. This technique is so accurate that Cayce used it to determine which souls were ready for advanced spiritual teachings and which ones needed to focus on basic consciousness work first. The results were always spot on. Now let me tell you about something that will absolutely blow your mind about spiritual evolution. In 1936, Cayce was asked to do a reading for a woman who claimed she had lived in Atlantis. Most people expected him to dismiss this as fantasy. Instead, Cayce not only confirmed her past life, but revealed something that changed everything we know about consciousness development. He explained that souls who lived during Atlantis had access to spiritual technologies and levels of consciousness that modern humans can barely comprehend. But here's the shocking part. Many of these advanced souls chose to incarnate in our current time period specifically to help humanity make a massive evolutionary leap. Cayce revealed that between 1900 and 2000, thousands of these Atlantean souls would be born with intact memories of higher consciousness levels. Their mission? To anchor higher spiritual frequencies on Earth and teach others how to access these elevated realms. This means that some people walking among us right now are operating from consciousness levels that are thousands of years more advanced than the average human. They're not here by accident. They're here on a spiritual mission to help our entire planet evolve to the next level. But here's what's even more incredible. Cayce said that any soul, regardless of their current spiritual level, can accelerate their consciousness evolution dramatically by understanding and applying what he called the universal laws of spiritual development. In one of his most comprehensive readings on consciousness, he outlined 5 specific practices that can move a soul from the lowest spiritual realm to the highest in a single lifetime. These aren't religious rituals or complex ceremonies. They're practical applications of consciousness that anyone can implement immediately. The first law is what Cayce called service above self. But this isn't just about volunteering or helping others. He meant something much deeper. Every decision you make, from what you eat for breakfast to how you respond to criticism, either serves your ego or serves your soul's evolution. Souls trapped in lower realms consistently choose ego gratification. Evolved souls consistently choose actions that elevate consciousness. But wait, here's where Cayce's teachings get really practical for modern Americans. In one of his most insightful readings about material wealth, he addressed the biggest obstacle facing spiritual seekers in the 20th and 21st centuries: the illusion that material success equals spiritual advancement. Cayce revealed that many souls actually regress spiritually when they achieve material success, because they mistake financial abundance for spiritual achievement. He saw countless souls in his readings who had been more spiritually evolved in previous lifetimes when they lived in poverty than they were in their current wealthy incarnations. This doesn't mean money is evil. It means that how you relate to material success determines your spiritual frequency. If your wealth serves your spiritual mission and helps others evolve, it elevates your consciousness. If it serves your ego and separates you from others, it traps you in lower spiritual realms. The second universal law Cayce revealed is thought as creative force. In one of his most profound teachings on consciousness, he explained that most humans have no idea they're constantly creating their spiritual reality through their thought patterns. Every thought you think is either raising or lowering your spiritual frequency. Here's the shocking part that most spiritual teachers don't tell you. Cayce discovered that positive thinking alone isn't enough to elevate your consciousness. In fact, he found that some souls had been using positive thinking to avoid dealing with their shadow aspects, which actually kept them stuck in spiritual limbo. True consciousness evolution requires what Cayce called purification through truth. This means facing your darkness honestly, accepting your human flaws completely, and loving yourself anyway. Only then can you access the higher spiritual realms where genuine transformation happens. The third law is healing as spiritual service. But Cayce didn't just mean physical healing. In one of his most revolutionary insights about consciousness, he revealed that every healed aspect of yourself automatically heals the same aspect in others, even people you've never met. This is because all consciousness is connected at the deepest level. When you heal your fear, you reduce fear in the collective human consciousness. When you heal your anger, you make it easier for others to release their anger. When you heal your shame, you help free humanity from the shame that keeps our entire species trapped in lower spiritual frequencies. This means that your personal spiritual work isn't just about your individual evolution. You're literally helping to evolve human consciousness itself. Every time you choose love over fear, forgiveness over resentment, or truth over illusion, you're pulling our entire planet toward higher spiritual realms. But here's something that will completely change how you view your spiritual journey. In 1942, Cayce gave a reading that revealed the single most important factor determining which spiritual realm a soul can access. It wasn't their good deeds, their meditation practice, or even their level of spiritual knowledge. It was their capacity for genuine forgiveness. Cayce explained that forgiveness is the master key that unlocks every higher spiritual realm. But not the kind of forgiveness most people practice, where you forgive someone while still holding on to subtle resentment or moral superiority. He meant what he called Christ-like forgiveness, where you completely release the need for anyone to be different than they are. This level of forgiveness is so rare that Cayce encountered it in less than 1% of the souls he read for. Most people think they've forgiven when they've simply suppressed their anger or decided to be the bigger person. True forgiveness requires seeing through the illusion of separation and recognizing that everyone is doing their best from their current level of consciousness. Here's a documented case that will show you exactly what this looks like. In 1938, Cayce did a reading for a woman whose husband had abandoned her and their 3 children for his secretary. She was consumed with rage and wanted to know if he would be punished in his next lifetime. Cayce's response shocked everyone in the room. He explained that her husband's actions were actually serving her soul's evolution by forcing her to choose between victim consciousness and spiritual mastery. If she could find genuine forgiveness for him, not because he deserved it, but because forgiveness would free her soul, she would make a quantum leap in spiritual development. The woman spent 2 years working with Cayce's guidance. When she finally achieved true forgiveness, she didn't just feel better emotionally. According to follow-up readings, her consciousness had evolved from the 2nd spiritual realm to the 5th realm, a jump that normally takes multiple lifetimes to achieve. But here's the most incredible part of this story. 3 months after she achieved genuine forgiveness, her ex-husband called her out of the blue. He had experienced what he described as a spiritual awakening and wanted to make amends. He had no idea she had been working on forgiveness. Yet her consciousness shift had somehow triggered his own spiritual evolution. This is what Cayce meant when he said that healing yourself heals others. Consciousness operates beyond the limitations of time and space. When you genuinely evolve spiritually, everyone connected to you, including people from past lifetimes, feels the shift and is given an opportunity to evolve as well. Now, let me share with you the 4th universal law that Cayce revealed. Death as conscious transition. Most people think death is something that happens to them. Cayce's readings prove that death is something you participate in based on your level of consciousness. In one of his most illuminating readings about the afterlife, he described how souls who have developed higher consciousness can actually choose their death experience. They can remain aware during the transition, maintain their memories and personality, and even guide their own reincarnation process. But souls operating from lower spiritual realms experience death as trauma and confusion. They often don't even realize they've died, and may spend decades in what Cayce called earthbound states, stuck between physical and spiritual dimensions, because their consciousness is too dense to access higher realms. This is why spiritual development isn't just about improving your current life. It's about preparing for conscious death and intentional rebirth. Every moment you spend developing higher consciousness is an investment in your eternal soul's journey. The fifth and final universal law Cayce revealed is time as illusion. In one of his most mind-bending readings about consciousness, he explained that souls operating from higher spiritual realms can access what he called eternal now consciousness, a state where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. This sounds abstract, but it has practical implications that will change how you live your life. When you develop this level of consciousness, you stop being driven by past regrets or future anxieties. You become completely present, which allows you to access the infinite creative power that exists only in the now moment. Cayce demonstrated this consciousness himself during his readings. He could access information from any time period, see probable futures, and even communicate with souls who had never been in physical form. This wasn't a special gift he was born with. It was a level of consciousness he developed through applying these same spiritual laws I'm sharing with you. But here's something that will absolutely transform your understanding of spiritual evolution. In 1943, Cayce gave a reading that revealed the true purpose of human incarnation on Earth. We're not here to escape the physical realm or transcend human experience. We're here to bring heaven to earth by anchoring higher consciousness in physical form. This means that the goal isn't to evolve beyond humanity, but to evolve humanity itself. Every soul who achieves higher consciousness while in physical form makes it easier for others to do the same. We're literally creating a new template for human potential. Cayce saw that by the year 2012, enough souls would have achieved higher consciousness that humanity as a whole would begin operating from elevated spiritual frequencies. He predicted that children born after this time would incarnate with natural access to psychic abilities, deeper spiritual wisdom, and an innate understanding of their soul's purpose. Looking around at the current generation of young people, we can see evidence that Cayce's prediction is coming true. These souls aren't interested in the same material pursuits that drove previous generations. They're naturally drawn to consciousness exploration, environmental healing, and authentic spiritual connection. But here's the most important revelation from all of Cayce's readings about spiritual evolution. Your current level of consciousness isn't fixed. Every moment presents an opportunity to choose thoughts, words, and actions that elevate your spiritual frequency. The question isn't which spiritual realm you're currently operating from. The question is, which realm do you want to access next, and what are you willing to do to get there? In one of his most practical teachings about spiritual development, Cayce gave the simplest and most powerful technique for accelerating spiritual evolution. Every night before sleep, ask your soul to show you one specific way you can serve love more completely the next day. Then pay attention to the opportunities that present themselves. This practice alone, done consistently, can move you from the lowest spiritual realm to the highest in a matter of months, rather than lifetimes. Why? Because it aligns your conscious mind with your soul's evolutionary impulse. But remember, spiritual evolution isn't about becoming perfect or transcending your humanity. It's about becoming more authentically yourself, the divine being you truly are beneath all the conditioning and programming. Your soul chose to incarnate at this exact time in history because you have something unique to contribute to humanity's evolutionary leap. The spiritual realm you're destined for isn't determined by your past mistakes or current limitations. It's determined by your willingness to keep choosing love, truth, and service in each moment. Edgar Cayce's 14,000 readings all point to the same profound truth. You are not a human being having a spiritual experience. You are a spiritual being having a human experience. And the quality of that experience, including which spiritual realm you'll access after death, is being determined by every choice you make right now. So here's my challenge for you. Take the consciousness mirror test I described earlier. Notice your reactions to people who trigger you. Use those reactions as a GPS system, showing you exactly where your consciousness needs to evolve next. Practice genuine forgiveness, not because others deserve it, but because your soul deserves the freedom it brings. Serve others not to get spiritual points, but because service is the natural expression of higher consciousness. And most importantly, remember that you're not on this spiritual journey alone. Every soul who has ever lived is connected to you through the same cosmic consciousness that Edgar Cayce accessed in his readings. When you evolve, we all evolve. When you heal, we all heal. When you choose love, you make it easier for everyone else to choose love too. The spiritual realm you'll inhabit isn't just about your individual destiny, it's about the collective future of human consciousness itself. And that future is being written by every choice you make today. Before you go, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell, because I'll be sharing more life-changing revelations from Edgar Cayce's readings that can transform your spiritual journey forever. Like this video if it resonated with your soul, and share it with someone who's ready to discover their true spiritual potential. Your engagement helps ensure this sacred wisdom reaches the souls who need it most. Remember, you are more powerful than you know, more loved than you can imagine, and more needed than you might believe. Your spiritual evolution matters not just for you, but for all of humanity. Keep choosing love, keep seeking truth, and keep serving the highest good. Your soul and our collective future depends on it. Edgar Cayce, known as the Sleeping Prophet, delivered over 14,000 psychic readings during his lifetime, but his revelations about the afterlife remain among his most profound and transformative teachings. Unlike traditional religious interpretations, Cayce's insights about heaven and hell came through direct spiritual communication while in deep trance states. These weren't philosophical theories or religious doctrine, but detailed descriptions of what awaits human consciousness beyond physical death. His readings, carefully documented by the Association for Research and Enlightenment, ARE, present a radically different understanding of our eternal destiny. Experiences we create through our own spiritual development and choices. This understanding has profound implications for how we live our daily lives, treat others, and prepare for our inevitable transition. The weight of personal responsibility becomes both liberating and sobering when viewed through Cayce's spiritual lens. Post-mortem experiences. We'll examine his detailed descriptions of different spiritual planes, the role of karma in shaping our afterlife journey, and how consciousness itself creates our reality beyond death. These aren't abstract concepts, but practical insights that can transform how you approach every decision, relationship, and spiritual practice in your current life. Afterlife teachings form a coherent system that bridges ancient wisdom with modern understanding. His insights don't contradict genuine spiritual seeking, but rather illuminate the deeper mechanics of soul evolution and cosmic justice. Unlike channeled material that often lacks specificity, Cayce's readings provide detailed maps of consciousness that have been verified by thousands of near-death experiencers and spiritual seekers worldwide. Of Cayce's heaven and hell revelations, we must first understand the unique source of his information and why his trance readings have maintained their credibility for over a century. The foundation of his teachings rests on a remarkable ability that allowed him to access what he called the Akashic Records, a cosmic library of all soul experiences, bypassed normal conscious limitations. During these sessions, documented between 1901 and 1944, Cayce would lie on a couch, enter a deep sleep-like state, and respond to questions with detailed information he claimed to access from the Akashic Records. These records, according to Cayce, contain the complete history of every soul's journey through multiple incarnations and spiritual planes. The Association for Research and Enlightenment has preserved these readings exactly as they were recorded, maintaining their authenticity for serious spiritual researchers. Patterns. Unlike religious dogma that often relies on faith alone, Cayce's readings provided specific mechanisms for how souls transition, what they experience, and how their earthly actions influence their spiritual journey. The structure of non-physical realms and the processes that determine post-mortem experiences. This wasn't channeling external entities, but rather accessing the fundamental patterns of spiritual reality that govern all consciousness. His readings consistently emphasized that these same universal principles operate whether we understand them or not. Detail and practical application. His descriptions of spiritual planes correspond to Tibetan bardos, Hindu lokas, and Kabbalistic sephirot, yet provide specific guidance for soul preparation and evolution. Modern near-death experience research has validated many of his claims about consciousness surviving bodily death, life reviews, and encounters with beings of light. The ARE continues to document cases where his predictions and spiritual guidance prove accurate decades later. Soul's ultimate destiny, continuous expansion of awareness without the limitations of physical form. The ARE archives contain dozens of readings describing this state as both achievable and inevitable for all souls willing to pursue spiritual growth. Radiated divine love and wisdom, becoming channels for healing and guidance. These souls had essentially created heaven on earth by aligning their will with divine purpose, demonstrating that the afterlife experience begins with our current spiritual choices. Their lives became testimonies to the accessible nature of divine consciousness, in continuous learning, creative collaboration with other evolved beings, and service to souls still evolving through lower planes. They participate in cosmic councils that guide universal evolution, contribute to the spiritual development of planets and civilizations, and experience direct communion with the creative forces that govern existence. This heaven is dynamic, purposeful, and eternally expanding rather than static reward for good behavior. Consciousness involves complete memory restoration. Souls remember all their incarnations, understand the lessons learned through each experience, and perceive the perfect justice of their evolutionary journey. Fear, pain, and limitation become impossible because consciousness has transcended the illusions that create suffering. Yet this state isn't achieved through divine favoritism, but through the natural progression of souls who consistently choose love over fear, service over selfishness, and wisdom over ignorance through countless opportunities across multiple lifetimes. Eventual heavenly realization, making this elevated state both earned and inevitable for every soul willing to pursue spiritual evolution. Lifetimes. Souls in this state experience the accumulated weight of their negative karma, finding themselves surrounded by thought forms and experiences that reflect their spiritual condition. The ARE documentation shows Cayce emphasized that even this state serves the ultimate purpose of spiritual education and eventual redemption. Souls in this condition experience the full impact of pain they've caused others, the emptiness of selfish pursuits, and the isolation that results from rejecting love and compassion. They remain in this state not because God punishes them, but because their consciousness has become so attuned to negative patterns that they cannot perceive or accept the love and help constantly offered by more evolved souls. Their own thought forms create their hellish experience, provided disturbing details about hellish existence that reveal the precision of spiritual law. Souls experience exactly what they've given. Those who caused fear experience terror. Those who inflicted pain suffer proportionally, and those who chose hatred find themselves surrounded by hostility. Yet even in these conditions, opportunities for redemption remain available. Higher beings continuously attempt to reach trapped souls with love and guidance, but these influences can only be received when the suffering soul genuinely desires change and accepts responsibility for their condition. Love and service create happiness, while selfishness creates misery. Once this lesson penetrates consciousness, the soul begins its gradual ascent toward higher spiritual planes. Actions, genuine remorse for harm caused, and persistent effort to develop love and compassion. This process might require numerous incarnations and intermediate spiritual states, but redemption remains possible for every soul willing to embrace the difficult path of spiritual growth. Incarnation. These realms, detailed in hundreds of ARE archive sessions, function as cosmic schools where souls work through specific lessons, karmic patterns, and spiritual developments needed for continued evolution. Each plane corresponds to particular levels of consciousness and spiritual understanding, allowing souls to associate with others of similar development while receiving guidance from more advanced beings. Explaining how souls engage in various activities designed to expand their consciousness and resolve karmic obligations. Some souls study universal laws and cosmic principles, while others work to heal emotional wounds carried from their earthly experiences. Many participate in service activities, helping newly transitioned souls adjust to non-physical existence or assisting in the spiritual development of planets and civilizations. The Sleeping Prophet emphasized that these planes offer unlimited opportunities for growth and learning without physical limitations. Planes designed for fundamental lessons about love, compassion, and universal connection. Movement between planes occurs as consciousness expands and spiritual understanding deepens. Studies or service activities that they delay reincarnation for extended periods, while others quickly prepare for return to physical existence to work on specific karmic lessons. The choice belongs entirely to the individual soul, guided by their spiritual advisors. Every choice toward love, wisdom, and service contributes to our eternal progression. Cayce emphasized that preparation for these realms begins now through meditation, study of spiritual principles, service to others, and the development of qualities that will serve consciousness in any realm of existence. Humanity's greatest mysteries. According to his trance sessions, documented extensively by the ARE, death involves the gradual separation of soul consciousness from the physical body, beginning with the release of the etheric body that maintains vital functions. This process can occur instantly in sudden death or gradually, over time in prolonged illness, but the essential pattern remains consistent. Consciousness simply shifts its focus from physical to spiritual dimensions. Death triggers what Cayce called the life review, a comprehensive examination of the recently completed incarnation where souls experience every action, thought, and emotion from their lifetime, from both their own perspective and that of everyone they affected. This review occurs in the presence of spiritual guides and is conducted with perfect love and understanding rather than judgment or condemnation. Souls see clearly how their choices contributed to spiritual growth or created karmic obligations, providing essential information for planning their continued development. Period varies greatly depending on the soul's spiritual development, the circumstances of their death, and their understanding of spiritual principles while incarnated, according to their consciousness level. However, they also carry forward their habitual thought patterns, emotional reactions, and spiritual development achieved during physical life, which determines their initial post-mortem experiences and the spiritual plane they naturally inhabit. Love and compassion, and maintained faith in continued existence, adapt much more easily to post-mortem reality. Those who denied spiritual existence, lived entirely materialistically, or developed strong negative patterns experience confusion, fear, and difficulty accepting their new condition, potentially creating temporary hellish experiences until they can adjust to spiritual reality. Ensuring that every action, thought, and intention creates corresponding consequences that must eventually be balanced. His readings, preserved in the ARE archives, described karma not as punishment, but as cosmic education designed to teach souls the effects of their choices and guide them toward spiritual wisdom. This law operates with mathematical precision across multiple lifetimes, ensuring perfect justice while providing unlimited opportunities for learning, growth, and redemption through countless incarnations. Perspective, but reveals perfect balance when viewed across the soul's complete evolutionary journey through multiple incarnations and spiritual planes. Pain they've inflicted. This experiential learning continues until souls develop genuine empathy, wisdom, and love that prevents repetition of harmful patterns. Karma serves spiritual education rather than cosmic revenge. Experiences specifically designed to address their karmic obligations and spiritual development needs. This pre-incarnation planning ensures that every soul receives exactly the experiences necessary for their continued evolution, though free will during incarnation determines how effectively they utilize these opportunities, an opportunity to balance past actions or develop needed spiritual qualities, while every blessing represents earned reward for positive choices made across multiple lifetimes. This perspective encourages personal responsibility, compassion for others' struggles, and patience with the gradual process of spiritual evolution that unfolds across countless incarnations and experiences in both physical and spiritual realms. Afterlife experience begins with daily choices made during physical incarnation, making every moment an opportunity to influence our eternal destiny. His documented sessions, available through ARE research, provided specific practices and principles that help souls develop the consciousness necessary for positive post-mortem experiences. These preparations don't require dramatic religious conversion, but involve gradual development of love, wisdom, service, and spiritual understanding that naturally align consciousness with higher spiritual planes and can navigate spiritual realms with confidence rather than fear or confusion. This spiritual foundation becomes invaluable during the transition process. Positive afterlife experiences. This service doesn't require grand gestures, but can manifest through daily kindness, patience, forgiveness, and genuine care for others' spiritual and material welfare throughout ordinary life circumstances. Knowledge for navigating post-mortem existence. Souls who comprehend these principles during physical life can cooperate more effectively with spiritual guides, make wiser choices about their continued development, and avoid the confusion that traps unprepared souls in lower spiritual planes. Destructive behavior. This inner work creates the pure consciousness necessary for experiencing higher spiritual realms while preventing the self-created hellish experiences that result from unresolved negative patterns. The goal isn't perfection, but sincere commitment to spiritual growth and the gradual development of divine qualities that naturally align consciousness with heavenly existence. Destiny of every soul is eventual reunion with the divine source from which they originally emerged. But this return occurs as fully individualized beings who have gained complete experience of existence through their evolutionary journey. This process requires countless incarnations, experiences in multiple spiritual planes, and the gradual development of perfect love, wisdom, and creative power that matches divine consciousness. No soul is ever lost or abandoned, regardless of their failures or the duration of their spiritual development. And love. They serve as guides for souls still evolving, participate in universal planning and development, and engage in creative activities beyond current human comprehension, developing both strength and compassion, and gradually transcending all limitations that prevent full divine expression. Some souls progress rapidly through this development, while others require extensive time and experience, but all eventually reach the same destination of divine reunion. Cosmic educational process. Every joy and sorrow, every triumph and failure, every act of love and moment of selfishness contributes to the soul's eventual perfection and divine reunion. This perspective transforms suffering from meaningless pain into meaningful education and elevates every moment into opportunity for spiritual advancement. Souls trapped in hellish consciousness will eventually learn, grow, and ascend toward higher understanding, while souls experiencing heavenly bliss continue evolving toward even greater cosmic participation. Cayce's vision reveals existence as an infinite adventure of consciousness expansion that culminates in perfect divine union while preserving the unique individual journey that makes each soul's contribution to universal creation irreplaceable and eternally valuable. Cayce's revelations about heaven and hell fundamentally transforms how we approach every aspect of current existence by revealing the eternal significance of seemingly mundane daily choices. When we recognize that our thoughts, emotions, actions, and relationships directly shape our post-mortem experience and spiritual evolution across multiple lifetimes, every moment becomes an opportunity to contribute positively to our ultimate destiny. This perspective eliminates the fear-based motivations common in traditional religious teachings and replaces them with love-based inspiration for spiritual development and service to others, necessary for positive transition experiences and continued evolution. These practices, documented throughout ARE research materials, don't require withdrawal from normal life, but enhance every activity with spiritual purpose and eternal significance. Practice forgiveness and understanding. Difficulties with others reveal our own spiritual weaknesses needing attention, and opportunities for kindness and support allow expression of divine love that benefits both giver and receiver. This approach transforms ordinary relationships into sacred spiritual practice that prepares consciousness for the love-based reality of higher spiritual planes. Spiritual expression rather than ends in themselves. Cayce's teachings suggest evaluating these activities based on their contribution to spiritual development, service to others, and alignment with divine principles, rather than purely material success. This doesn't require poverty or withdrawal from society, but brings spiritual purpose to material activities that transforms them into opportunities for demonstrating divine qualities and assisting others' spiritual and material welfare. Continue your spiritual journey informed by these profound teachings. Remember that every soul eventually reaches the same destination of divine reunion, but the path you choose through your daily decisions determines the ease, beauty, and service opportunities available along the way. Subscribe to explore more of Edgar Cayce's revolutionary spiritual insights, share this understanding with others who might benefit from eternal perspective, and begin today implementing the principles that create heavenly consciousness while still in physical form. Your eternal adventure has already begun. These teachings simply help you navigate it more consciously and effectively.